And this afternoon, we want to talk matters to do with corporate governance and really where are we as a country, as well as just looking at some of the issues around economic freedoms versus the politics of the day. And joining me this afternoon, we have two high-profile CEOs, and that is Edwin Dande, who is the Chief Executive Officer for Cyton Investments. Many thanks for making time to join us.
Thanks, glad to be here.
We also have with us Powell Maimba, who is the Chief Executive Officer for Galana Oil. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for making this afternoon count.
Thank you. Thank you.
So really, let's just quickly dive into the issues at hand. There's been a lot of talk around corporate governance, and companies haven't been able to really address issues to the core. And I know Cyton did release a report around this, and just walk us through some of the key findings of this report, Dande.
Thanks, Abi. Corporate governance is really at the heart of managing a company, whether it's for shareholders, whether it's for the board, for the staff, for the clients, and essentially means the set of rules, processes, and practices around decision making, and then who's making that decision. So some of the things we found that companies that rank higher in corporate governance deliver better returns for their shareholders. Companies that are more diverse in terms of their board members, that diversity in thought, that diversity in decision-making leads to better decision and better values. Companies that abide by codes of conduct that are transparent. I mean, while corporate governance sounds like a big word or a big phrase, it's as simple as how was the decision to, I see you have an iPad, how was the decision to buy an iPad or to buy a phone or to buy a vehicle made? Who makes the decisions? What is the process? How is it implemented? And if you look at some of the big losses we've had, brands, whether it's Imperial, Nakumat, KQ, Mumias, the common theme across all of them was failure of corporate governance. So it's a really key and crucial thing to protect the company and to make sure it's sustainable.
So who is to blame? Is it the board or the CEOs?
I think it's the entire organization and system, because the CEO cannot do things alone, the board cannot do things alone. The clients should have asked. I mean, if you take some of the brands, if I were to take some, Nakumat is a very respectable brand, but go back and ask, was there an investment committee? Was there an HR committee of the board? How many independent directors were there? What was the decision to make, and how was the decision to open branches made?
Correct.
You will find that in most of these cases, it was failure of corporate governance, and it is everyone, because corporate governance is in the interest of shareholders, the board, management, staff, and clients. The entire ecosystem has to demand a better corporate governance system.
And I know, Powell, you're also very passionate about corporate governance. And looking at the recent trend of developments, there seems to be a lot of public confidence questions on companies, especially on the directors who are considered to be, quote-unquote, greedy.
Yes. Look, I think the problem that we have today is that people, let me go back to the corporate governance side. The way I look at it is corporate governance is purely running the company properly. So if you look at the company and it has got its own objectives and it's got its own targets to achieve, failure to understand those targets and objectives together as a corporate leads into an issue of corporate mismanagement. So basically, if you look at the trust and the situations that are happening that should have not happened, if really the focus was the interest of the organization at heart. And that interest, to me, doesn't sit in one person. That's where also corporate governance fails. When the CEO or the board thinks their overall decisions are the ones that make the government run, the company run, then you end up in a situation whereby you take the company into a direction where you're not supposed to take it.
So is it a question of weak compliance, a question of compliance, or is it just moral ethics at different levels in the organization, Dande?
For me, I think it's an evolution process. There's a reason why we call ourselves a developing country. It's an evolution process. That's why we took the initiative and delivered really the very first corporate governance ranking report in the market. And if you talk to people, at least behind private conversations, they will tell you that the report has made people take a step back and look at, is the board diverse? You'll tend to find that in most cases it's mainly men, and it tends to be older men. So people are taking a step back and asking, is the board diverse from an age perspective and also from a gender perspective? Just go look at many listed companies. They've made board changes over the last 1 year because there's been a prompt to take a step back and look at the board. So I wouldn't say there's any specific person to blame. I would not say that it's systemic. I would say we are evolving, and also there's an education that needs to be done. The person who will drive corporate governance the most is going to be the shareholder and the client. Yeah. If you are invested somewhere, if you are using products of a company, take a step back and go to their website and ask, can I know what are the boards that are in this company? Are the boards diverse? Because if you don't, especially for an investor, one of the biggest ways to predict whether you will lose and make money is, do you have good corporate governance? And it's as simple as, are they disclosing as much as possible on their website? Can you tell what are the key committees just by going to the website?
Disclosure seems to be very paramount, Powell.
Yes.
Especially in the line you are in, the petroleum sector, where a number of issues have emerged, where we're seeing the Energy Regulatory Commission had a crackdown on about 19 petrol stations, 6 were closed, and eventually the consumer usually asks, why did I get to this point? Why isn't someone being prosecuted for a wrong in running affairs in the company?
Yeah, I think I'll first start where he stopped. Where does corporate governance sit? The corporate governance sits in how the organization is structured and how you do your day-to-day business. For example, as to be here, there are a number of people involved to make this interview successful.
Correct.
And we all have one objective, to deliver this particular interview. And within that framework, there is corporate governance. If anybody does anything outside that delivery of things, then you miss what you're supposed to do. That's the key essence of corporate governance. Around that, there are certain rules, regulations, the board, and all that. All those rules and regulations that are put around the corporate governance system is trying to assist the organizations run effectively well and achieve their objectives.
But we cannot, sorry to interject,
yes.
we cannot run away from the fact that these particular organizations also are prone or sort of vulnerable to political influence.
Yes,
and that's where politics and economy comes in, where Dande gets a call that you need to make sure this and this has to happen.
Yes.
I mean, how do you balance this?
Yes, again, you have the power of politicians and the power of economists and the individual power that you have as an individual. If you're given a position of authority, you have to differentiate in between that. Now, if you are, let's say you're doing a job and you're in a political position or government position where politicians influence, you need to make a call between following what the pressure comes in or the right to do the right thing.
Sure.
Now, if we all decide to do the right thing, and the right things, you don't need to go to school. Everybody knows this is the right thing.
Some say doing the right thing is not easy.
Well, it's not easy.
It
needs commitment.
Yeah.
It needs some kind of level of your own moral position. It's not the structures that you put in place. Actually, if you check, and probably agrees with me, government has got the most stringent systems and processes to ensure there's corporate governance. But it's the most vulnerable organization if you look at it as an organization.
All right. So, Dande, looking at the future right now, we're seeing a lot of interest in Africa. Many companies are coming in to set up, and companies are also expanding. And corporate governance is still considered a boardroom thing. How do we move it and also see SMEs being able to embrace this kind of good practice in leadership and even in running their affairs?
Just to pick up from where Paul left it, one, there are two things working together. One, you need the policies, processes, and procedures. If I were to just pick something that Justice Maraga said recently, the greatness of a nation lies in the rule of laws and following its laws. The greatness of a company is having policies, processes, and procedures that are visible, that anybody can follow. Now, of course, we are individuals. We'll find ways to try and cut through or evade those policies and procedures. That's where the values come in. You have to be very clear what are your values.
Sure.
But the way to move these things from individuals is to make sure there's a very clear handbook as to how the company is run in a very detailed way. Going back to your question,
sure.
If you don't adhere to corporate governance, it's just a matter of time before the system shakes you out. Look at what's happening in the retail sector. As I said, the common thing about all these companies is failure of corporate governance, whether it's Uchumi or Nakumat. Now, what does that mean? You've said companies are coming in. So in retail sector, who's coming in? It's Carrefour.
Yeah.
Look at the banking sector, who I saw in the papers, I don't know whether it's today or yesterday, who is acquiring Chase, or who's interested in acquiring Chase. It's State Bank of Mauritius.
Correct.
So it is in our own interest to sort out corporate governance. If you don't sort out corporate governance, it will be too late when the organization is failing, when you don't have stock on the shelves, or when you don't have money to pay your depositors or your investors. And at that point, another organization will come in and buy you on the cheap. Who suffers? Of course, it's the shareholders, it is the client. So it is in our own self-interest, and that's why for us we emphasize incredibly hard around corporate governance. An organization should not be run around one individual or a set of individuals. It should be run around a set of rules, processes, and practices that anybody can read and understand.
Yes. All right, many thanks. Well, gentlemen, quite a very expansive conversation, and definitely we cannot exhaust it in one sitting.
Yes.
And we'll definitely make it a more regular slot on our program. Thank you so much for making time this afternoon.
Thanks,
Edwin Dande, CEO, Site on Investments.
Thanks.